Welcome back to Switch to Linux. It is another outdoor philosophy. I hope the lighting's okay. It's a little shaky where I'm at, but we'll deal with it. So we're going to continue the discussion of First Things First by Stephen Covey. And today we are on the chapter on First Things First Together, which is talking specifically about synergy with other people. So we talked last time, if you remember, about interdependence and the importance of knowing what people you want to move towards, which ones you don't. And so that's kind of the direction that we're going to be taking things from today. Now this is a very long chapter, so I'm going to try and keep this video right about the same length I always do. 10-15 minutes or so is what my goal is, which means we might skip over some things. But pretty much there's a few overarching things that they say at the beginning and they keep coming back to. So I think that's one of the things. We'll say this up front. When you're working synergistically with a group of people, you want to take a win-win approach, okay? You don't want to look at who's going to win, who's going to lose. You don't want to look at what approaches you can take that, you know, who's on top. You want to look for win-win. What is it that is going to be a compromise? That's the other word for this, a compromise. And compromises, of course, this is something that is starting to die in our culture as all sorts of weird agendas and weird philosophies start bringing themselves up all over the place. We start seeing people who, they do not want compromise. They want the whole world to absolutely see everything the way they see it, and hell or high water, and they're going to try and get you fired and do whatever they can. It's just crazy in the head, okay? That's not the principle, but in reality, that's what happens when you have an ecocentric, me-centered world with no values and no cultures and no morals. That is where the denial of truth got us. It's the reality. But we need to go back and stop and go, okay, I don't really care. Let's think win-win. So win-win means that everyone is coming to the table and looking at accomplishing from their own, accomplishing what they want to accomplish. So the first step to this is being understood. So in order to understand somebody, you also need to be understood. So this means that you need to sit down, put the metaphoric piece of tape over your mouth, and listen to the person and ask questions. Understand their perspective, because once you understand someone's perspective, you will have a whole lot better conversations, a whole lot better discussion, and a whole lot better drive to do what are the right things through that. So you need to do that. Of course, there's another phrase you oftentimes hear, it's walk a mile in another person's shoes. And that is the reality, that we need to approach things to understand. We have to understand the other person's point of view, even if we don't agree with it. You have to learn to understand what they're talking about. They give us a few different examples here. Up here we have the two people looking on different views. Of course, this represents like a concave mirror or a concave piece of glass. Like, of course, even this camera has a fisheye lens, which is concave, which actually drives me a little crazy. But it basically means that stuff up front could get, if I get too close, it's like, whoa, it just gets all the rounding, and then, of course, everything farther away just starts to wrap around in a circle. I really don't like that look, but yeah, we deal with it. But that's kind of what happens, is this person's looking through a concave lens, this person's looking through, what's the opposite of this? I forget, is it concave and convex, I think? Well, if you walk over to the other side and get to the other side of the mirror, you can both kind of see it. Because this is what happens, is we all interpret reality from our own personal biases, which lend to distortions. So all of us are looking at reality through our own personal distortions. You need to understand and respect, not just understand, but respect somebody's distortions. Respect the distortions. Because we all come from different places, and this gives us different perspectives. And then we can figure out what is the common ground. So we talk about synergizing. Of course, the most classic famous synergy stories, if you take two independent horses that can pull 800 pounds each, and you put them together, even if they've never pulled before, they will synergize and pull 2,400 pounds. So it's not twice, it's a factor higher than that. And that's what synergy means. So this entire section is about synergizing with another person so that each one of you can meet your first things. And so what we end up doing is they go into a lot of discussion. We're going to spend a lot of time there looking at where successful companies are. And most of your successful companies spend the majority of their time in that quadrant 2. Important but not urgent things. They'll spend some time in the urgent and important things, but they spend a very little amount of time in quadrant 4, not important, not urgent. And they actually spend a comparative little amount of time in the urgent and not important column as well, quadrant 3. And so they're spending most of that time in the important but not urgent, because that gives them the preparation that they need to approach the urgent things as they arise. And that's really the concept we want to look for. And so what we need to do is figure out how you can share a vision. So creating the shared envisionment means that if you're talking about an organization of some form, maybe you're starting a small organization, maybe it's a group, or maybe you coach a team, or whatever the circumstance happens to be, come together with a shared mission and a shared goal. Athletics is pretty easy. Your shared missions and your shared goals. Oh, sorry for you OCD people, I fixed my color now. So is for like a sports team, the shared mission and the shared goal is maybe to win, maybe to improve your skills. Maybe it's something more out of the box, like let's make sure that everybody on our team it gets to handle the ball a couple of times, even if it's the worst player on the team, because that builds so much confidence that now the worst players on the team can come back around and help out. That's the most awesome thing you could do, because it's not all about just winning. Create a shared mission for your goal. You want to make sure there's enough people for a shared mission. You want to make sure everybody is fully informed about what you're trying to do, and you want to interact freely and synergistically and in an environment of high trust, which means that you're not going to tease the kid who can't throw a basket for nothing, but somebody's still going to pass him the ball every game. Okay? And that's the type of thing that really helps. And so what we want to talk about is the importance of these goals. So your importance is, first, is you want the desired results. What are you trying to accomplish, and what outcomes do you want? That is kind of the thing. So are these quantitative goals? How much? Or are they qualitative goals? What was the quality? So those are all things that you need to do. What are the guidelines and the parameters that you need to establish in order to do these? What resources does each person have available? If you're talking about a business team, there's a thing called empowerment. If you want me to do something for you, I have to be empowered to do that. If you tell me, go make 15 phone calls, and you don't give me a phone, you have not empowered me to do my job. And that's kind of what we're talking about. What's the accountability? Whom are you accountable for your actions and for your work? And what are the consequences? And don't just think consequences negative. Think positive and negative consequences. What are the consequences of getting a job well done? An increase, a bonus, a better team environment, or negative consequences. What happens if you don't meet your goals? What happens if you don't do all these things? And so they identify, I believe it's 5 steps here. Yeah, kind of 5 steps here to create the win-win stewardship. So they're talking about stewardship. If you remember the concept of stewardship, it's that somebody else owns this, but I'm going to help manage it. Okay? And so number 1 is you need to specify the desired results. If you both come to the table with different expectations, obviously one or both parties are going to be disappointed when things don't come out, because the expectations haven't even been set to the start. So if I hire an employee with the expectation of building some certain thing, I have to have something built in order to see that. Number 2 is set the guidelines. So what is the power of, what is the level of empowerment the person has? So there's another book that I've never read. They quote it here from William Onick, identified 6 different layers of guidelines. So with 6 different layers of empowerment. What do you authorize a person to do? Number 1, wait until you're told. So you might have that job that no matter what happens, you have to stand here and wait until you're told. Number 2 is, at what point in time do you have to ask? Maybe something comes to your attention, now you need to ask what you need to do. Number 3 is recommend. At what point in time do you recommend somebody do something? Number 4 is simply act and report immediately. Number 5 is act and report periodically. And number 6 is simply act on your own. And usually like a boss has an act on your own kind of thing. Actually, they more have an act and report periodically to their boss. But then with each individual desired result, you can have a different guideline for each. So the example they use in the book, which is a good one, is a secretary. A secretary might have a level 5 act and report periodically every time the phone rings. The boss doesn't need to be aware of it every time the phone rings. Imagine having a secretary, you're in there doing your work. The purpose of the administrative assistant, we'll use that word, is to make sure that the simple tasks are taken care of so you can do your job. And imagine every single time the phone rings, the guy or gal comes in and says, hey, some guy just called to set up an appointment. dude, stop telling me, okay? Good, I'll see the appointment on time. But if at the end of the day he comes out, or maybe at the lunch break he comes out, like, hey, what are the reports? Okay, well, we had 5 calls, I scheduled 2 meetings for you, they're on your calendar. Oh, great. That's the level. But if it's something important that comes in, like maybe it's hiring somebody, you might, as the administrative assistant, you might have the authority to recommend, but you're not necessarily going to say, do this. It's just a recommendation. So guidelines are important and they're relevant to the individual goals set. Number 3 is identify the available resources. You have to empower somebody to do the things that you want them to be able to do. So you have to identify the resources and grant all resources available. So if I want somebody to be able to write a chapter of a book, they need to have access to something that they can write on. Okay, and that's kind of that thing. Number 4 is define accountability. To whom and when is a person accountable? Are they accountable every day? Are they accountable every hour? Are they accountable every week? And to whom are they accountable? Who do they tell for this? At what instance do you give this report? And then number 5, determine the consequences. And they actually seem to only address the negative consequences. I will add the positive as well. There are positive and negative consequences for our actions. When we do great positive things, we can land ourselves in great positive blessing. But if we fail to do our tasks, we can have bad circumstances show up. We have to keep that perspective in mind. And then, of course, on a chapter like this, we have to address the last thing. What happens when we just don't agree? And that's a good question. What happens when we just don't agree? So the first thing is we want to go back to that framework of think win-win. Don't disagree, and then now that you have a disagreement, you want your way, they want their way, it causes a fight. So you want to start with the win-win. So you seek to understand their perspective by calmly talking about the differences. Ask questions to help you understand the perspective. And then figure out ways to synergize. And this is the hard part. What can you do to possibly help in the circumstance and in the situation? So that is kind of the steps to how to go about a first things first and a first things together approach. Figure out what are the things that you need to do and figure out what you need to do to achieve them. Working together, win-win, understanding the other person's perspective, and then resolve problems by going back to those core principles and come up with a solution that is mutually beneficial. So thanks for watching. If you like this video, check out switchtolinux.com/support to learn how you can support us. And I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.